Hello again, everyone. Rock music was shocked when rumors spread that Ace Frehley, the famous Kiss guitarist known as Space Ace, had recorded a sad last message. His powerful solos and cosmic image defined a time of rock excess and freedom for decades. But he was a man at war with himself, plagued by health problems, drug abuse, and broken friendships. At the end of his life, Ace left behind a voice recording with everything he was too proud to say while he was living. It wasn't for the fans or the press, but for the few people who really knew him. What Ace said in his last words would make even his harshest enemies shut up. In the years before that scary letter, Ace Frehley's life had been a strange mix of happiness and sadness. Ace was the driving force behind Kiss in their early years. He was once hailed as one of the best guitarists in rock history. Classics like Shock Me and Cold Gin were shaped by his unique sound, which showed how rebellious he was. But as his fame grew, so did the chaos. Ace's problems with drinking and drug abuse were well known. It was those scars that made him stand out. His voice got weaker, and his hands, which used to be like magic when playing the strings, started to shake from wearing out from years of abuse. A change was seen by friends. He'd stop talking in the middle of a sentence to think. He thought about old concerts, broken teammates, and forgotten dreams, as if his mind were stuck in the past. He talked about Kiss very little these days, and when he did, it was with a bitterness that time had not fixed. His close friends would tell him, "I gave them my best years, but they only remember the bad times." There was a man who was drowning in regret behind the jokes and cosmic image. Ace still found comfort in his music, which he recorded in peace in his New York home studio. He'd play late at night, and the sound of his music would fill empty rooms. It was a rough sound, almost like a ghost. Later, his partner said that he had heard him say to himself, "This might be the last one," after each exercise. What came next was a scary build-up to those words. Ace made a confession on his phone in which he talked about the fear of death, fame, and betrayal. He also told something even darker, a secret he had been keeping since the end of his time with Kiss. This made his last message impossible to ignore. Ace Frehley's last message was found on a phone that was found next to his speaker, which was the same setup he had used since the beginning of his solo career. He felt safe there, with the guitars, tour souvenirs, and faint smells of cigarettes and vinyl sleeves. Johnny Z. Zuda, Ace's close friend and lab tech, was the first person to walk into the room after he died. He said that the silence was too much to bear. No static hum or strings playing, just the quiet nothingness of a life that had ended. His phone was on the table. The screen was broken, and the battery was almost dead. Johnny turned it on and saw one last voice memo with the words "for them" written on it. It started out quiet, but with each word, the message inside that recording got heavier. Ace's voice was thin, shaky, and almost destroyed. No one ever thought they'd hear him say sorry to his friends, but that's what he did first. "I know I wasn't perfect," he said, "but I tried to give you everything I had left." Then his tone shifted. He spoke about the years he felt betrayed, how fame had twisted friendships into rivalries. He mentioned Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons by name, saying they'd turned their brotherhood into a business. "They made me feel like a visitor in my own band," he whispered. But Ace didn't stop there. He spoke of the loneliness that fame never fixed. The nights when he'd sit alone replaying old footage of himself on stage, pretending it was still real. "I thought I could outrun the years," he said, "but they caught me." His breathing grew heavier toward the end of the recording. Then came a pause, long, painful silence, before he said something that would send chills through anyone who heard it. "There's something in that vault," he said softly. Something they never wanted anyone to hear. That single line sparked a storm among those closest to him. What was in the vault? Was it music, a confession, or proof of a hidden feud buried deep within Kiss history? As rumors spread, fans began searching for answers, and the truth that emerged would forever change how the world remembered Ace Frehley. The vault Ace Frehley mentioned in his final message wasn't a metaphor or a rumor. It was a real, heavily secured room he'd built deep within his New York home, lined with steel panels and humidity control. Friends called it Area 51 because only Ace had the key, and even he joked that what was inside was too cosmic for anyone else to handle. Over the years, he dropped hints about it in interviews, claiming he was keeping the truth safe there. A truth the world wasn't ready to hear. When he passed away, his family, lawyers, and longtime technician Johnny Z. Zuda were granted access. They expected to find old stage gear, demo tapes, maybe unreleased songs from his solo projects. But the moment they opened the door, they were hit with something far stranger. The room smelled of old paper, metal, and burnt circuits. Dozens of shelves lined the walls, stacked with tapes, reels, notebooks, and photos. Decades of Ace's life frozen in time. But it was the center table that drew everyone's attention. There sat a small metal box engraved with the words, "For them." Inside was a folded note, a cassette, and a faded Kiss backstage pass from 1982. The note read, "Play this. Only if you really want to know what happened." When they inserted the cassette into an old player, the first few seconds were filled with static. Then the sound of Ace, quietly, tuning his guitar. His voice came next, hoarse, uneven, trembling. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone," he said. What followed was not music, not laughter, but confession. Ace spoke of a dark period during the Creatures of the Night sessions when Kiss was struggling to stay alive in a changing music world. He said that during those sessions, strange men appeared at the studio. People who weren't on the payroll, who claimed to be backers from a silent investment group. They offered huge amounts of cash to keep the album alive, but demanded complete control over certain tracks. Ace said he protested, but something happened one night that changed him forever. He remembered blacking out mid-recording and waking up hours later to find the guitars redone, his solos replaced, and his lyrics rewritten. "They took something from me," he said, "something I never got back." As his voice grew weaker, he confessed he had dreams afterward, recurring visions of being back in that studio, hearing whispers through his headphones, voices that weren't part of the tracks. He even claimed one of those voices said his name. "I thought it was the drugs," said, "but it kept happening, even when I was clean." The final minute of the tape sent chills down everyone who heard it. Ace whispered, "They told me to keep quiet, but I couldn't die without saying this." Then a faint, distorted voice echoed in the background. Too soft to make out words, yet unmistakably human. The tape ended abruptly, followed by a faint mechanical sound, like a reel stopping on its own. Forensic experts were later called to analyze it, but the results only deepened the mystery. The voice wasn't Ace's, and it wasn't anyone recognizable from the Kiss archives. Some audio technicians suggested it was an accidental overlay. Others said it was impossible because the tape had never been edited. For Ace's loved ones, the vault was no longer a collection. It was a haunting museum of things he couldn't let go of. His journals, lying beside that cassette, hinted at even darker memories. Entries filled with fragmented thoughts, cryptic sketches, and chilling phrases like, "The night they took the sound," and "the man with no face in the control room." Whatever haunted Ace Frehley in those years didn't just steal his peace. It may have followed him until the very end. The journals found beside the cassette opened a door into Ace Frehley's mind during his most fragile years. There were more than 20 notebooks stacked together, their covers worn, pages filled with erratic handwriting and half-finished sketches of guitars, planets, and faceless figures. The first few entries were normal, tour dates, song ideas, memories from the road. But as the pages went on, the writing grew darker, more fragmented. He wrote about sleepless nights, hearing static when no devices were on, and seeing reflections move when he was alone in the studio. One chilling passage read, "The man in the control room isn't real, but he watches me play." Another said, "They said they needed my sound, but when I played, something else came through." His bandmates had long suspected that Ace's mind was clouded by years of substance abuse. But these pages suggested something deeper, genuine fear. He wrote of the 1982 sessions, claiming there were moments when his hands moved on their own, playing riffs he didn't recognize. He described a strange humming that filled the air whenever he picked up his guitar, a vibration that made him dizzy. It wasn't feedback, he scrawled. It was a voice talking through the amp. By the mid-2000s, Ace's journal entries shifted to isolation and regret. He wrote that he'd started hearing the same hum again in his home studio decades later. "It followed me," he wrote. "I hear it in the silence before I sleep." In one of his last entries, dated only months before his death, he wrote, "I know what they took." It wasn't music. It was memory. Investigators who reviewed the journals said they could feel his paranoia bleeding through every line. Yet there were details too specific to dismiss. He mentioned exact dates, session names, and even equipment serial numbers from studios that no longer existed. Johnny Zuda believed Ace wasn't hallucinating. He was documenting something he couldn't explain. The final notebook ended abruptly with one final sentence underlined 3 times. The vault isn't the end. It's the beginning. After that, Ace stopped writing altogether. Those close to him said he became distant, barely speaking, spending long nights staring at the vault door, as if waiting for it to open by itself. What haunted him in those last years wasn't fame or failure. It was the fear that whatever he'd encountered in that studio had never truly left him. In the final years of his life, Ace Frehley's world began to unravel in ways that even those closest to him couldn't explain. His health had started to deteriorate, heart issues, tremors, and bouts of memory loss that came without warning. But alongside the physical decline came something far more disturbing, a growing sense that he was being watched. Friends recalled how Ace began installing extra locks on his doors, covering cameras with tape, and refusing to sleep in the same room 2 nights in a row. He claimed he heard footsteps in his hallway and music playing faintly through his walls at night, even when the power was off. His partner said he'd wake suddenly, gasping, whispering that he'd seen the man from the control room standing at the edge of his bed. At first, everyone assumed it was his mind betraying him, a product of years of stress, age, and medication. But then strange events began happening around the house, lights flickering, instruments detuning themselves overnight, and ACE's recordings randomly deleting. Without explanation, his security system once captured audio of faint whispers in his studio at 3 a.m., saying words no one could make out. The file was later corrupted, but Ace swore he'd heard someone say his name. He stopped performing altogether and spent most of his time alone, sitting near the vault with his old Les Paul resting against the chair beside him. When friends visited, they said he spoke softly, like he was saving his strength for something important. "They're still here," he told Johnny Zuda one night. "They don't want me to finish it." No one knew what it meant, but there were rumors he'd been working on a final piece of music, something he believed would set him free. Toward the end, Ace's condition worsened. He suffered several small strokes that affected his speech, yet he refused hospital care. Instead, he wrote messages on scraps of paper, leaving them scattered across his studio. One note read, "Don't erase the last track. It knows." The atmosphere in the house became so heavy that even visitors said it felt colder every time they entered his recording room. Days before his passing, his partner heard him playing a haunting melody late at night, the kind that sounded like both a goodbye and a warning. The next morning, the music had stopped and the room was silent. When the tape was later reviewed, the last few seconds captured Ace whispering the same chilling line from his earlier recording. "They told me not to tell." But what truly sent shivers through those who loved him most was what happened after he died. Because that final melody, the one he'd played on his last night, would mysteriously reappear on a file time-stamped hours after his death. When investigators and audio experts examined Ace Frehley's final recording, they expected nothing more than static and fading guitar tones. But what they found was far stranger. The file, time-stamped several hours after his confirmed time of death, contained a haunting composition unlike anything he had ever recorded. It began with faint guitar chords, slow and echoing, followed by a low hum that seemed to rise from nowhere. The first few seconds sounded peaceful, almost like a farewell. But as the track continued, strange distortions began to appear. Faint voices overlapped the melody, whispering words no one could clearly identify. Some swore they heard Ace's own voice layered beneath it, whispering, "I told you." Others claimed to hear laughter, distorted, mechanical, almost inhuman. The experts who listened to the sound said that the file didn't make sense. Metadata showed that it was made and saved at 4:12 a.m., a long time after ACE had passed. At that time, there were no signs of hacking, no remote access, and no recording devices in the room. What the spectral study showed was even scarier. Waveforms that looked like human speech patterns were hidden in the radio frequencies. Still, their voices didn't match any that were known. It made Johnny Zuda feel like he was in a room where the walls were alive. At the same time, he said it was beautiful and scary. The tune seemed to change based on who played it. As if the song were real, it was sometimes calm and sometimes crazy. One tech tried to find the source of the background hum, but kept having to hard restart his computer because it kept crashing. As the track played, another expert said he heard light knocks on his studio door, but no one was there. But what really scared everyone was the ending. There was no sound for exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds. After a deep breath, there was a whisper that said, "It's still here." All of the tests showed that the breath belonged to Ace Frehley. Something was wrong. It was taken 12 hours after he died. In the end, his estate locked the file so that it would never be seen by the public. However, a 5-second excerpt got out online and was later taken down. Hearing it said it sounded like a man fading between life and something else as he played his music. Some people thought it was a computer glitch. Others said it was proof that Ace's last song wasn't played for people who were still alive. The audio clip that was stolen from Ace Frehley's vault quickly went viral on fan sites and other hidden parts of the internet. After just a few hours, thousands of fans started to analyze the 5-second clip, saying they could hear secret messages in the static. Others said the sound wasn't Ace's at all, while others slowed it down and said they caught Ace whispering. People got very angry about the strange timing of the file, which was taped a long time after he died. It was called a scam by doubters. But the numbers showed something else. The recording's digital fingerprint didn't show any signs of being edited or tampered with, and experts who looked at it confirmed that the file was real. In the meantime, paranormal hunters became interested, thinking that Ace's energy had somehow left its mark. On the studio, the 3:33 date, or witching hour of sound, was used as a sign, which is thought to be the center of spiritual action. Even Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, who usually don't pay attention to gossip, had to talk about the story in public. Gene said it was both creepy and beautiful, and he knew that Ace had always had a little of the world inside him. The mystery was brought back to life by what happened next. After a month, Ace's partner chose to open the vault again to protect the last few tapes for safekeeping. It was noticeably cooler inside than the rest of the house when the door was opened. There was a faint metallic hum in the heavy air, the same hum Ace had written about in his diaries. It looked like someone had gone through the reels because some of them that were nicely stacked before were now lying on the floor. The Yule cassette with his statement was no longer there. The only box left was marked for them. Inside it was a new note written in Ace's clear handwriting. "Not gone. The sound is just different." Experts in handwriting said it was exactly the same as his old notes, but the ink looked new, like it was written days ago. No one went into or out of the vault during that time, as seen on security video. Paranormal experts thought that Ace's hand had not written the note in real life, but by something that had carried his intention after he died. That made things worse for his family. For good, they locked the vault and said it could never be opened again. But rumors keep going around that one last digital file hasn't been shared yet. The return was named by one Ace himself. People who saw the file name say it was made exactly 1 year after he died. Exactly at this time. There had been rumors and silence about Ace Frehley's vault and final message for months, but finally his estate gave permission for one last probe. Technicians found a hidden folder deep inside his old studio computer, which led to the choice. The folder was protected by a password called Spaceman. When it was opened, it had one video file inside called The Return. There was fuzz at the start of the video, and it slowly came into view. Ace was in his studio by himself, with only one blue light on. In a strange way, his face looked both weak and tired. A soft voice said, "If you're watching this, it means I'm finally free." His voice was shaky, but it still had that unique New York drawl that fans knew and loved. He told them that he had spent his whole life looking for a frequency that didn't belong in this world. "Vibration is life," he said. "Music is energy. Unfortunately, I found something I shouldn't have." He told them it wasn't feedback that he had been hearing for years, a frequency that he thought was linked to awareness itself. He called it the note between notes. It was something that people couldn't hear but could feel deep inside. He said that one night, when he was recording by himself, he caught that frequency again. It made him feel like the walls of reality were shaking. He told you in a whisper that you'll feel it too if you play it, but don't play it for too long. There's no end to it when the music stops. Though he wasn't speaking, soft tapping and a hum slowly built up behind him and shook the speakers. Ace gave a small smile and looked away from the camera, as if he knew who was there. "The last thing he said scared me. I am no longer scared. I have finally arrived at my destination." The screen flickered, and Ace's image showed up in the studio window for a split second, but he wasn't sitting in the chair anymore. With the sound of a guitar string snapping, the video stopped quickly. The audio experts said there were no signs of tampering with the file, but the faint hum kept going even after playing stopped, so they had to unplug the whole system. The video was never made public, that it was too upsetting and personal for the family. Ace did not mean for the world to hear his real goodbye. In his last letter, he didn't tell anyone to be careful or admit guilt. That was the only way he knew how to say goodbye, by making noise. Fans who still go to his old house say they hear faint guitar notes coming from the vault that is closed off, and then a word that sounds like it came from another world. I'm still here and playing. In addition, Ace Frehley may not have really left. He just discovered a frequency that none of us can hear.